Hi, everyone. Welcome to Interchange. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us. Lots to talk about today. Yet another gruesome execution of an American hostage, and more criticism by some that President Obama is not doing enough to make sure that it doesn't happen again. We'll talk about the race between Governor Scott Walker and Mary Burke and how folks see this campaign shaping up as we enter the final 2 months. And we will also talk about the apparent meltdown of the Milwaukee Brewers so late in the season. Okay, let me introduce everybody. You know longtime newspaper columnist Joel McNally and Kevin Fischer, who spent many years as a broadcast journalist. Denise Callaway, communications and public relations professional. And of course, Gerard Randall, education consultant, local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz is going to be along with commentary at the end of the show. Okay, let's talk first about the beheading of another American hostage by Islamic extremists. Does President Obama really not have a strategy to defeat ISIS, or is he simply being measured, very strategic and methodical in an attempt to control ISIS without putting thousands of American soldiers in harm's way? Gerard.
So I always want to think best of our leadership. And I believe that he's been given quite a bit of information as to what the lay of the land is over in the Middle East, and frankly, who our enemies are that we need a more urgent response to. What I think is happening is that he doesn't personally want to tip his hand, but there are still more calls for a more emotional response from him. And I just don't know that that's in his makeup. What we've seen this week is that emotional response come from the vice president. We've seen internal memos that have been leaked that clearly had to come from high-ranking advisors that would show that this is something that's been on the administration's plate for some time. But again, I gotta believe that anyone in that position, especially the leader of this country, would have some kind of game plan that they've asked be executed and that we follow through on. Now, that being said, I still believe that within the next couple of weeks, something is going to come forward out of the administration that shows the United States will not put up with this kind of torture of American citizens, threats to American citizens. If anything, one of the things that we've been able to hold dear is that as an American, you could travel abroad without fear for your personal safety, especially in countries that we supposedly have as allies. And this is just one of those situations where I gotta believe the president is listening and that he's gonna have more than an adequate response to these acts of terror, these heinous acts of terror that have been committed against American citizens.
Denise, you have to wonder what kind of American pressure is going to be put on the president if this happens again next week, if there's another video the week after that.
You know, I think what is so unfortunate about all of this is that we talk about this in the very real sense of what this means to America, but it's also what it means to these families who have seen their loved ones or know that their loved ones have been butchered simply because they've been trying to tell the story of what's happening in the Middle East. And they've reached out to try to help people who are suffering and to tell their story. I don't know how you take a group like that is so mobile, that is so insular at this point, as far as we know, and try to find a way to break into that group to stop these types of activities. Unfortunately, I think we have to take a look at a long-term stance. As the president has said, you have to find a way to dismantle this group. And if we take a look at what this president has done over the past couple of years with drone strikes and with other very targeted actions, that is precisely what we have done when we take a look at groups like Al-Qaeda. We have come in and through these very strategic efforts, many times done very quietly, we have been able to ratchet down that leadership, and it's not nearly the type of organization that it was before. Unfortunately, the problem in the Middle East is that whenever one organization seems to be on the wane, another one certainly seems to rise and take its place. This president, we have to remember, is someone who is incredibly strategic and does not show his hand. We might remember that the night bin Laden was killed by the Navy SEALs, where was the president? He was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, you know, cool as a cucumber, not giving any kind of indication of what kind of plan that not only had been in place, but was being carried out there. I think the other thing that the president is taking a look at is America cannot be the only nation that is engaged in this activity, because we are not the only nation at risk. He wants to find out what our European allies are going to do, and he has got to, and I believe they are working hard to bring in allies in the Middle East as well to attack this issue.
Kevin, is he taking time to build a coalition, or is he taking time because he doesn't know what to do?
I don't know what he's doing, but from what you see and hear, I think you have a clueless president, and you're seeing a collapse, a total collapse of his foreign policy. And I praised the president a few weeks ago for the military tactic of airstrikes in the Middle East. Those worked. Since then, he's done nothing except go on the golf course and just practically ignore what's going on in the Middle East. He says, and I think we have to take him at his word, he says he has no strategy. Well, if that's the case, don't broadcast it to the entire world, which is filled with terrorists who want to kill Americans. If you do have a strategy, don't say what it is. And like he's mentioned his timetable for getting out of Iraq, a complete taking the troops out of Iraq. If anything, things have gotten worse since he's done that. He has a laissez-faire attitude about Syria. Things aren't going very well there. I think you're looking for the kind of aggressive attitude that was expressed by the vice president, who says we're going to follow these people to the gates of hell. What do we get from our commander-in-chief of the most powerful nation in the world? We get, we're going to degrade the situation until it's manageable. Now, I don't know what that means. I would like to see a tougher, more aggressive attitude, especially when the world is getting more dangerous and you have the leader of the most powerful nation in the world saying, we don't have a strategy. To me, that looks like he's pretty clueless and really doesn't know how to handle this situation.
Will he put boots on the ground, do you think?
No, I do not think, but I think this is an incredibly dangerous period for this country. And what makes it even more dangerous is the attitude that Kevin just showed, which we're also hearing out of some of the stupidest, most ignorant United States senators in this country. I have heard rhetoric out of the Republicans. Ted Cruz said the other day a phrase I hadn't heard since Vietnam, that we need to bomb them back to the Stone Age. This is total ignorance. It is like politicians trying to out-tough each other, trying to, you know, show I'm a bigger, tougher guy than everybody else, and that is what exactly has led us into every war that we have ever gotten into and couldn't get out of, including the two that we have just gotten out of under the last administration, which in fact had no strategy, went in as aggressive to show how friggin' tough we are, and all they did was lose American lives, old men sending young men into war to die so they can look tough. And that is, it is such a dangerous idea. I think that the president we have right now is exactly the president we should have, someone who is cool, who does not, you know, make inflammatory statements, does not, you know, try to out-tough everybody else, but says, you know what, we're going to develop a strategy, we are going to accomplish it, and as this administration has shown, we're not talking about not killing bad guys. We have killed bad guys. In fact, we've killed more bad guys and not so bad guys with drones and without putting boots on the ground than I'm comfortable with. But in fact, we also need some intelligence behind everything and not just a bunch of inflammatory emotion.
All right, next topic. According to some polls, the race for governor is so tight that it's too close to call. This will make for a very interesting campaign. Some fireworks this week when Debbie Wasserman Schultz used some pretty inflammatory phrases to criticize Walker's policies and how they affect women. How do you see this campaign playing out in the weeks ahead, Kevin?
Well, now it gets interesting because people are going to be paying more attention. And the candidates are going to have to frame themselves. And so far, we know a lot about Scott Walker, and his positions and his ideology. We don't know that much about Mary Burke, who's been mainly on the attack and has been given a free pass by the mainstream media. She's never given a tough question. When she is questioned, Politico asked her a simple question about what do you disagree with President Obama on? She had a 12-second pregnant pause. That won't work. That won't work on the debates, where Scott Walker, I think, is going to be masterful in handling that in the questioners and giving a distinct description of where he wants to continue to take the state. We don't know what Mary Burke stands for. We don't know how she feels about Act 10, which we learned this week is working again with another new report that municipal spending is down since Act 10 was enacted, and municipalities and cities and towns and villages are doing just fine. I think that now that we are going to talk about specifics and records and issues, and Mary Burke can't hide behind answers like, well, I'll have to think about that. I haven't thought about that. I'm going to do some research on that. I'm going to work hard on that. She's going to actually have to specifically tell why the progress that Scott Walker has made shouldn't continue, and we should go back to the days when she was Commerce Secretary under a very unpopular governor at the end of his term.
When Debbie Wasserman Schultz made those statements, at first I thought, oh, she chose the wrong words. But she's a bright lady. Do you think she knew exactly what she was saying, and she'd get the exact attention she got?
And I think so. And as a matter of fact, I think she spoke the truth. I don't think there's any question that the Republican Party in general and Scott Walker in specifics, have taken very anti-women actions. First of all, trying to, put the Catholic religion doctrine into law to deny women a right to decide whether to give birth or not. To put religious tenets into the law to make everyone follow a religion is as unconstitutional and as un-American as it's been considered from the founding of this country. And then you're talking about denying equal pay for equal work. You're talking about denying the right of women to go to court to challenge some of the inequalities that are taking place. It needed the attention called to it, and particularly
not in the manner she's.
Oh yeah.
Oh, come on.
I am so.
That was over the top.
Politicians are so phony. They pretend to be offended by language they use all the time. It's the policies that are offensive, not the way Debbie Wasserman Schultz described the policies.
Talk
it's
about
the policies that are offensive.
The merits. Talk about the merits of those policies.
She very bluntly called the governor out, and he deserves to. And with a woman running this year for governor, and an anti-woman governor, these issues are going to be debated, and they're going to be debated in very, blatant language.
I hope you're right.
And I believe they should be.
I hope they invite Wasserman Schultz back time after time after time.
If you were an unbiased,
in favor of Mary Burke.
If you were an unbiased observer, which you're not, who should be more nervous right now? The Walker campaign or the Burke campaign?
I think the Burke campaign should be more nervous. First off, what Wasserman did was create a huge distraction to what Burke may have tried to get out as some of the key issues of the campaign. They've got two women that lead the ticket for the party in the state, and neither of those women had the opportunity to get their message out because they had to respond to the message that Wasserman Schultz put out there. So the distraction, one, took them off message. Two, I do believe that Wasserman Schultz, not only did she choose the wrong thing to say, what she said was untrue. And that piece is going to be responded to over and over and over again because it's raising money for Walker. And his supporters are now outraged, and they're coming out in greater numbers than perhaps those that Wasserman Schultz tried to generate or gin up for Burke.
If some were complacent,
I want to have a chance to weigh in.
Yeah, maybe a woman should
if some people were complacent, they're not anymore, thanks to Wasserman Schultz.
Exactly.
Right. Well, no.
Go ahead, Denise.
Well, thank you for allowing me to speak, Kevin. How nice
I'm anxious to hear your defense of those offensive comments.
I think that what has happened is that that I think it's a little unrealistic to say 2 days after this happened, we're already seeing this is ginning stuff up. I think what it's doing is ginning folks up who were concerned about the comments that were made and the fact this was made in a very public way, in a public stage by one of the brightest and smartest women in this country, who just happens to be a Democrat and who just happened to be right that some of the efforts that Governor Walker has made have been devastating to women. And you know what? On the Walker campaign, I agree with you. I'd much rather talk about what Debbie Wasserman Schultz said, because then I don't have to talk about how I have failed on a promise to deliver 250,000 jobs to this state. So I am sure the Republicans are going to keep trying to gin this up, because then they don't have to talk about the issue that's really facing the governor, and that is the fact that he failed to live up to that promise. Now, you can talk about Mary Burke and how when Mary Burke was Commerce Secretary, that Wisconsin, just like states all across the Midwest and around the country, at the beginning of this recession, we're losing tens of thousands of jobs every month. Here's the difference, though. When she was Commerce Secretary, every state around us was experiencing that same job loss. Governor Walker has been governor, and as we've come out of that recession, we are dead last in terms of the number of jobs that have been created compared to those other states around Wisconsin. I think that puts the governor in a tough spot. It is
no
hard
more than
to
it
talk
puts
about,
the president in a tough spot for only having created 178,000.
Right,
yeah, but it's relevant. It's relevant because where you all would want to challenge Scott Walker on his promise to build 250,000 jobs over 4 years, and no one has said that he's met that challenge to the degree that he would like to have met it. But frankly, all that money that was spent by the federal government to create jobs, that's fallen flat on its face, and nobody wants to accept responsibility on the Dem side for that.
Here's the thing: as we talk about the race for governor in Wisconsin.
You want to hold him to a standard that you won't hold the president to.
I want to hold him to a standard that he created for himself.
And he's willing to be held to that.
Nobody came out and said, you know, we think you should create 250,000 jobs. That was something he decided to do, and it's a standard.
And got elected on it.
Right, and it's a standard that now he is some.
And Mary Burke will do better.
Well, I'll tell you what I think will happen with Mary Burke. If we take a look at one of the differences that happened in Wisconsin that didn't happen in other states, that around us, what we saw was a devastation to public employees under Act 10. People lost their jobs. People are paying more out of pocket. So let me finish.
Teachers are still teaching.
Let me finish.
Police are still policing.
For less money.
You know, I always can tell when I'm so close to making a point that's just going to rub you the wrong way, because you will not let me make it.
This isn't monologue. This is dialogue, and you've been going on for a long, long time. I'd like to respond to some of the stuff you're saying.
Kevin, you just let me speak 1 minute and 45 seconds ago. So let me just try to finish what I was saying. I know you
can
do this
interrupt
all
you, but
the
I
time.
can't. Okay.
I know, because you just are not very gentlemanly when you do it, Kevin.
Oh, okay. Sorry, so, Denise Wasserman Schultz.
Let me say this, that one of the things that happened is that people in Wisconsin who are public employees who make up a significant percentage of people in this state have less money to spend.
That's
and that has impacted our ability to grow jobs and grow the economy. You can't take money out of the pockets of tens of thousands of people and expect that your economy is going to grow at the same rate of other states where you haven't had it.
And that's what the average taxpayer in this state is so happy about, because less money is coming out of their pockets
to pay for those Cadillac benefits of the public workers.
Oh my
they just have to pay a little more for their health insurance.
Please.
Oh my, how awful.
Kevin is a public worker.
Next topic.
Not exactly true.
Let's talk sports.
And I'm not the issue, Joel. I wish you wouldn't bring that up. My employment is not the issue here.
All right, let's talk sports for just a few minutes. After a fantastic few months, the Milwaukee Brewers seem to be in a meltdown mode. Thursday night was their 9th straight loss. They're no longer in first place. And the Packers get crushed by Seattle and Russell Wilson in the season opener. Is this going to be a long fall?
Poor Joel.
Okay, Mr. Schill, come on.
And the Badgers lost.
Here I am dying here, and you turned to me first. Thanks a lot. Yeah. You know what? I would rather think it's going to get better. I would rather think that. You know, there are people in this group.
Swept by the Cubs.
We know them well. We know them well, who are just so. You know, there have been people waiting for the Brewers to collapse all season. And they didn't. They were in first place most of the season. And here it is, the crucial month, and they're falling flat on their face. But you know what? It is a good month.
They're only 2 games
because
out.
we are playing everybody we have to beat to rise to the top of the division. And we've now had this slump, and boy, I hope it's over. Boy, I hope it's over.
One would think eventually, right?
And so, you know, this is a good team. It has good pitching. It has good defense, even though it has good offense, even though they've been having lousy offense, and still good pitching. But even the defense is starting to get shaky.
And what happened to your Packers on Thursday night?
Oh, don't want to talk about it. I mean, no, what happened is they met the team to beat in the NFL.
Yeah.
The Seahawks were just incredible. You know, they really are a team that is so deep defensively and offensively, and you cannot say, I don't think, enough stuff about former Badger quarterback Russell Wilson. I mean, he is just phenomenal. The poise and the knowledge that he shows on the field can't be beat. But I also have to tell you that the 12th man in Seattle, I don't know who wants to play in that place other than the Seahawks, because you could see several times, even though the Packers had practiced under conditions where there's a lot of crowd noise, you know, where at the end of the first quarter, where Rodgers had to take a timeout because he can't hear. But without a doubt, Seattle is the team to beat. So it is nothing but uphill from this point on for the Packers.
Ron Reineke has been brilliant all year long.
Oh,
What does he do now?
He gets fired within the next few days. I honestly believe that.
Wow.
But first off, they're 2 games out if they get swept by St. Louis. They'll be
4
7 games out.
Yeah.
7 games out if they get swept.
But he's right, and he'll tell you why he's right.
I do. Thank you. So I think that Reineke is going to get swept because part of this, unlike the other 2 teams, this is primarily a head game. And he's not the one to get this team's head back on track. In the case with the Badgers, and I was there at that game, it was a huge disappointment. For 3 quarters, I was on cloud 9, and then I just watched it all unravel. They've got one head case that they've got to deal with, and that's Joel Stave. I think the rest of those guys, they'll get their act together. They'll get some punch after they beat up on Western Illinois in the game this weekend. And then with the Packers, I think there too, if it's an infrastructure issue that can be fixed. Both lines can be addressed, but I do think that what's going to happen is McCarthy is going to take a heck of a lot of heat. And what may happen for him is that Mike Murphy will have to make some decisions about whether or not he gets an extension after this year.
I mentioned something you did not say about the Brewers. And what are you going to tell me? I have 6 seconds?
30 seconds.
Okay. You have the same management, Antanasio and Melvin, that fired Ned Yost right around 2 or 3 weeks before the end of the season when they were in a pennant race. So the same thing could very well happen here. This is not I think it's an average team, the Brewers. They had some breaks when they went 20-7. Since then, they're a 500 team. They can't seem to beat the good teams. And they have offense and defense and pitching, but I don't think enough that'll carry them through. When they all fall flat on their face and no one picks the team up and carries them on their shoulder, that's pretty bad. The Packers, it's just one game. Don't worry about. The Badgers are going to run the table, and then they're going to rue the day they lost to LSU because they could have played for the national championship.
All right. Back to politics. A prominent governor found himself under the spotlight this week. Actually, it was 2 governors, one in Virginia and one much closer to home. Here's Rick Horowitz to compare and contrast. Rick.
Some guys go for the fancy stuff, the free vacations, the golf bags, the Rolex, driving the Ferrari. This guy, for instance. Other guys, that stuff doesn't interest them at all. They're not in it for the high life, for all the trimmings. They're in it for the power, for the chance to push an ideology. This guy, for instance. That first guy's probably headed for prison. This second guy, too soon to know. But we do know this. Public corruption comes in lots of different flavors. And to win an office or to keep it or to use it as a cash machine and goodie bag, some public officials cross the line over and over again. You know it when you see it, and you can smell it too. You can even smell it. It took the better part of 2 weeks, but the smell of the latest disclosures coming out of this little corner of the Midwest, it even reached the editorial board of the New York Times. How to Buy a Mine in Wisconsin. That was the headline on their editorial earlier this week. It described the secret $700,000 contribution a mine operator gave to a supposedly independent group helping Scott Walker win his recall election in 2012. The mine operator wants to rip iron ore out of a miles-long pit they want to dig up north, and the independent group is an operation run by one of Walker's top political guys. It's all on the up and up, Walker keeps insisting. I never asked for the $700,000, he says, and besides, I supported the mine even before all that money came in. All on the up and up, he says. Really? Then why was it so important for Walker's people to keep the money secret? To make sure it went to a group that wouldn't have to disclose its donors, a group that could coordinate with the Walker campaign to, the campaign's own words here, to ensure correct messaging. The legal term for that is illegal. No disclosure is what you want when you know what you're doing can't stand the light of day, when it might make you look tawdry or beholden or worse. This isn't how it used to be around here. Badger State air was clean air. Scott Walker's been a big part of changing that. Now, the prosecutors and the courts, they'll have to sort out exactly which laws may have been broken, but we know what rotten smells like. This is rotten.
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.